Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Ajar and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Laura McIntosh and Dr. Hazel Clay today to discuss how our regulatory and operational teams work together to support your drug development programs. Let's go meet them. Hi Hazel, hi Laura. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Altasciences?
Nice to see you, Stephanie. I'm the Executive Director of the Program Management and Regulatory Affairs team at Altasciences. These two teams work very closely together with our operational teams and our sponsors to make sure that they have a seamless experience in their journey at Altasciences. Particularly, our regulatory team works together with our sponsors to help them with their regulatory strategy.
And I work within Altasciences as a scientific advisor in drug development. And so I'm working very closely with our sponsors, trying to understand what their goals are, and more about the molecule, working with the regulatory team, coming up with a development plan, but then staying with the project as the execution phase through the non-clinical into the clinical part of the process.
Can you describe the level of support you provide for preparing regulatory documents?
Sure. So we can help our sponsors from the very beginning to the very end. So if they come to us and they don't really know much about the regulatory pathway or whether their data is enough to even support a regulatory filing, we can do a gap analysis and provide them with a regulatory strategy document. And then we can stay with our sponsors the whole way along, helping them with pre-regulatory meetings, so what we call a pre-IND or a pre-CTA meeting, at which case we would be presenting some data and asking the regulatory agency whether they agree with the approach or not. And then we can also submit the applications to the regulatory authorities, whether it be the FDA or the IND.
So you're in constant communication.
Yeah, and the regulatory team would drive that sort of writing of the investigator's brochure or any briefing books, but sections would be reviewed by the SMEs. So particularly if we've done the IND enabling package, we would be reviewing those sections to make sure that they accurately represented the data we've generated, really. But everybody knows which bit they're supposed to be looking at, so we're not duplicating effort.
That's great. So everybody is really an expert on their level, so everybody comes together and puts the piece of the puzzle together. And that's
usually,
when...
and usually it's on a very short time frame.
I'm sure it is. And that's where Altasciences
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we'll do as well is we will help our sponsors prepare for those meetings. So we will have dress rehearsals with the SMEs and with the sponsor so that when we have a meeting with the agency, usually by phone these days, but we're still ready and we know which questions to ask, who's going to answer the questions is really key as well, so that it's as seamless as possible when we have those meetings.
So that helps the sponsor really. It supports them, it guides them. They're more confident, basically, in their next step of their drug development journey.
You have one chance at it usually. I mean, there's a few different types of meetings that can be requested, but normally there's only one pre-IND meeting that you can have, and you really don't want to waste your opportunity, so want to make sure we're as prepared as possible.
So can you describe how you collaborate with other services in providing the support for the drug development process, whether with bioanalysis, clinical, preclinical? So how do you collaborate? And
so part of my role is working within the project teams and supporting our sponsors there, and we will be bringing in the different disciplines as needed for that particular project. And that might be, can we do something a little bit differently? Is this the right bioanalytical technique, for instance, or is there another way that we could do this? I can think of a recent example where the pathway we were going to take with an analytical wasn't going to necessarily be the right approach because of the nature of the molecule when we started working with it. So we'd work very closely together, always keeping the clinical team informed of any results as they emerge during the program, so that they can take into account that with any modifications to the protocol.
for example, one site cannot do it, let's say for the bioanalysis portion or even the clinical portion, we have other sites. And so there's a possibility of basically taking the work and going to another site if ever one site cannot necessarily.
Yeah, we've done that in several occasions, and obviously the program management team are instrumental in making all that work for us. But when a sponsor changes the nature of a clinical design, we brought on another clinical site rather than just the single site that we were intending. So there are ways that we can help adapt as drug development happens, really.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that flexibility. We're able to pivot quickly, and
Yes.
so that's also a big advantage.
And we also help pre-award too, right? A lot in the early stages. So Hazel's talked about the post-award, how we support, but we work with the teams also pre-award, BD, as well as the operational teams to make sure that we're designing the best thing for our sponsor and placing it in the right place as well.
Absolutely. So can you share an example of how your teams have collaborated on different studies, projects, programs?
We've got so many examples. But,
Even though Hazel's in the UK and I'm in Canada, we talk very frequently throughout the day.
I mean, I can think of one where a sponsor was discussing placement of a study in the clinic. It was a novel formulation. It was going to be an extended release of an existing product. And they were discussing that. And when they shared the data, it was clear that actually they hadn't got enough data to go and support that study. So we designed a bespoke toxicology study just in male animals, because we're only going to dose males. But, various aspects of that study design were fit for purpose. And of course, they wanted it to stay on track as much as possible. So very close liaison with the toxicology team, the medical writers, the regulatory team, and the clinical team to make sure that we quickly got that study started and kept the clinical study on track.
Yeah. So again, the flexibility part, despite what is happening outside of that study, the teams are available and align with everyone to make sure that we're supporting the sponsor.
Our regulatory team was very involved, of course, with this as well, because this study happened in Canada, so the CTA team was there and making sure that they were really writing that application while the data was coming out pretty much to keep the sponsor on time, and then the submission happened.
All right, so that's one great example. Can you think of another complex situation where you've overcome a challenge and you made our sponsor happy?
Yes, I can think of another one. This was a sponsor that came to us with monoclonal antibodies, interested, really their first time entering drug development. So they didn't have a lot of experience with all of the steps that they needed to take. So we started working with them very early on to really help design their clinical study so that when we could work backwards and make sure that the non-clinical supported that clinical design. And of course, the regulatory was also in alignment with all of the planning. So we really held their hand and worked with them through.
In fact, we had a consulting agreement for that because there were many, many months of discussion around the appropriateness of the study design because of the nature of the target of the monoclonal. And then once we'd actually thrashed that out, we could then work out what should be the non-clinical plan? And we came up with quite a novel solution for that too.
So you sort of started from scratch. They came to you with the least information possible, and you sort of took it and you said, all right, we got this, we got you. So
we love those.
That's it. We love a challenge.
And we did a pre-CTA meeting for that specific sponsor as well. So we went to the regulatory agency to present the clinical plan and get buy-in and really coach them through that whole process as well. So yeah, I mean, we love seeing things from the beginning to the end, and we received their no objection letters just recently to start the clinical studies. So it's so satisfying to be able to see that happen.
That's great news. Laura, Hazel, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss how our regulatory and operational teams work closely together to help our sponsors. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.